Okay, we did it.
Yes. Wonderful.
Great. Welcome.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our conversation tonight on navigating the liminal, the in-between stage of change, and looking at how do we stay grounded and connected within that. And Haaweatea and I teach together and have many discussions about change. And this is a topic that just keeps coming up over and over and over for ourselves, as well as for our clients and students at this time, where really globally we are in a big experience of change and discombobulation. And so we thought we'd talk a little bit today about really put words to the experience and normalize what's happening, as well as really look at, what do we do at this time?
Yeah, and I think that there's something unique about right now about the fact that we're collectively going through something and we've actually been in it for quite some time. So I think as we talk about it, people's experiences are going to pop up in them, both of how they've maybe felt in the last year or two, but also maybe other times in their life, and also the individual piece that comes up when we're in the liminal, which, I hear people saying like, oh, this is like an added thing. And it's like, no, that's it. That's like the bottom of it that emerges. And also I think we have a lot of context for the other two stages of change, or of, the rite of passage, and not so much for the middle, because we sort of talk about it, things when they're falling apart or when we're going through loss, and we maybe talk about things at the other end when we've come out the other side. But most of the time when we're in the middle, we're often alone, or we're going, it's not something we like brag about or talk about or share necessarily so openly, or we normally share about it in terms of like retroflectively. So it's just nice for us today to be normalizing this and putting words to hearing words. And
Yes. And so we'll say a little bit about who we are and where we're coming from, so you have a sense of that. Do you want to go first, Haaweatea?
You can, Katie.
Okay. So my name's Katie Asmus, and I am here from Boulder, Colorado in the U.S., which is the original land of the Ute, the Cheyenne, and the Arapaho people. And so as I'm speaking about my experience, know that this is where I'm sitting, this is where I'm living, though I'm also talking to people around the world in different ways. As my work in the world is a psychotherapist, as well as a life coach, and I do a lot of supporting therapists and healers through teaching classes and mentoring. And Haaweatea and I teach healers rites of passage, ceremony, and ritual work. And so one of the things is I have these conversations all day long with people, which is very connecting to really feel, be able to talk about what's happening, and really been hearing a lot of themes of grief, the grief of what no longer is, and the grief of the unknown, and all the different feelings and emotions that are really going with that. So with the collective conversations, we just felt like we need to talk about this in a bigger way. That's just a little piece here.
So my name's Haaweatea Bryson, and I'm currently sitting on a Rockwell country, which is the easternmost point of Australia. Australia is where I was born, and my other family and communities are in Aotearoa, South Island, and also Hawaii Island, where I've been based for the last 5 years. And yeah, my relationship, I guess, to this conversation is also as a psychotherapist, really kind of focusing on relationships, which is also at the heart of change, and trauma and life transition, and also as a Maori healing practitioner. So the sort of traditional healing and lens traditional, as in, lineage, that also is helpful for me as part of my ground in this work. And, as a rite of passage guide, and also alongside Katie, as we, offer this training too. And I think I just really agree with you about it being it's a really, there's something that I really, what's the word? Just love about being in this seat, because I think you do hear the themes, you do hear, you realize the commonalities when you get to sit with people in this way. So I appreciate that, and I know that that's also just really helpful. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And just feeling the honor of being with change over and over, and feeling the inevitability of change, that life is change. And that as we are talking about this, I think one of the things that we are a part of this. We are a part of the changing that's happening in the world. And I often say in my conversations with clients and therapists, I haven't gone through a pandemic ever either, so I'm not really sure what to do. But I think one of the things are about, what we do and with rites of passage is that we're in that conversation of how do we tolerate the liminal, and how do we be with it and move through it all the time, really on a day-to-day basis, which I think that really is the question here.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're starting, we'd love to say a few words about what is the liminal, and what does that mean? How does that relate to change? Do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I think part of the context that we're holding to is that there is a map here. It's a universal, it's part of humanity. It's, and yet every time we go through it, it is different. It's different for us. Our experience with it's different, and that's the purpose. But that what we're referring to with the liminal is this in between stage of the rite of passage or of change. So, sometimes called like the no name stage or the messy middle. The word liminal is a Latin word that connects to the word threshold. And, we're up against our edges in this place. And also sort of the term of like the liminal veil, where it is veiled, and it can be really confusing and disorienting and hard to see, and groundless, and a lot of these words, that come up with this. But it's also, that is the purpose at the same time of this middle stage, is that it's in between what we've let go of, or the way things were, and it's not yet what it's going to be, and that we can't miss this middle. Like the middle is essential to even move into what will be.
Mm.
Do you want to add to that kind of definition, Katie?
Yeah, well, I love how you just placed it in the context of change. And I think that in my experience, so many of us don't want to hang out in that in between, because it's so groundless and uncomfortable, and we want to get to the next thing, or know who we are, or feel confident or competent in the next aspect of our identity or what we're doing. And like you said, we can't hurry it. It's really a place we need to be so that we can emerge into the next phase or aspect of ourselves or our lives or our identities. And I'm just thinking, as beyond the definition, I think of the work that I do with psychotherapy as a rite of passage in and of itself, in that it's a structure that people come to for guidance, for support, typically because they're in some unknown, right? That some aspect of life is not working or has been shifting. And it's a place where it's a time when we need support, we need guidance, we need something to help us sort of stay grounded as we're as we're in that unknown space.
Yeah, and just adding to that too, since you're talking about, a form of being with people in it, that there's also, you know, every sort of quest, pilgrimage, um, initiation also involved. There's that saying, to fast from all things familiar is a way to enter the liminal. So we would actually deliberately set up containers and
Yeah.
experiences to put people into this stage. And so all the things that emerge when we're in there, and for those with us, Katie and I often refer to it as like, and this is, part of a bigger map that is older than us. But everything in our ordinary world is sort of above the surface, and that's both, the letting go and what's to be. And when we go into this liminal, we kind of go into this underworld or this extraordinary world. This it's very alive, and it's so alive because there's all these moving parts. So it's like it can be so overwhelming because we don't even have a reference point often in the liminal, because everything's changing and everything's moving and everything's uncertain, or we can't hold to one thing. But there are features that come up in this, and yeah, it's been part of the rights, human rights of to be in this place. And so I think about, one of the features of this, for example, is doubt. And that our self-doubt comes up the moment we enter the liminal. It's one of the things we wrestle with, and yet it's like flushing out, like that we at some point we need to sit with the doubt that we're holding for, that's part of the call, right? And another one of like distraction, which might be one of the early things that we experience, of like just wanting to distract ourselves, because just to move away from what's happening. And also it can kind of feel like if we were to be with things, they would actually become overwhelming. And yet, and we might even have a restlessness too with this. And yet the moment we can, in terms of, we're going to obviously come back to this of ways to be in here, but the moment we can actually be with whatever we're distracted from, then we normally start to feel a sense of ourselves again. But it's like this process of finding a new ground, and the things that we relied on just sort of continue to get removed from beneath us. So yeah, just acknowledging, especially in the first part of this stage, how the things that we trusted, the things that we were sure of about ourselves or others, often change. And so it actually brings us into a deeper clarity on the other end. But it can just be it can really throw us off. Things that we were able to depend on, that now we can't.
Yes. And as you share that, what I feel is all the different emotions, the diversity of emotions that can come up in this place of the unknown. And especially, like you said, the beginning of it, where there's the loss. And sometimes the loss in a change is chosen. We're letting go of a old identity, maybe, to take on a new role in life, whether that's a parenthood or a job or something like that. And other times when we go through big transition, it's not chosen, such as a loss of health, or in a tragedy or trauma. And either way, as we let go and we're in the unknown, like you said, the doubt comes up, and often there's fear or collapse and depression because we don't know what to do. We can go into a state of freeze and overwhelm. On the other hand, sometimes there's excitement. Sometimes there's both anxiety and excitement, because there's also a sense in this place of, well, there's a lot more, there's a lot that's possible. Or the question, like, what is possible now that wasn't possible before? What is possible that I may never have even thought about? I'm just thinking about, since the pandemic began, all the ways that we have found creative ways of connecting, and even you and I connecting with people around the world. that I may not have otherwise as I was doing my in-person work more on the day-to-day. So the there's all the emotions come up when there is the unknown. Also,
Yeah.
common ones. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add, I just appreciate you talking about the swing. Well, that's how I'm hearing that there's a swing between, feeling hopeless and hopeful. And there's so many, I feel like this is like the mother of all paradox, is what lives here in this liminal space. So it's like the yes and I think as humans, we we weren't raised necessarily to hold those things together, which is part of the conflict that comes up in us in this stage. And I think that the liminal is a stage where we actually need a tremendous amount of space. And I've heard it described in different stories as like a place, like it's a place that you arrive in. So it's not, I think often unconsciously we're like, get me out of here, I want to like rewind or go back, return to whatever normal was, or we start to kind of bargaining or think, a certain action will change it, or all these things that actually we have arrived somewhere. And it's just that it often has the feeling like it won't end, but the reality is it will. It can't, hold. And so yeah, just the paradox and just putting space around the fact that we can be both excited and anxious, at the same
Yes.
time, or emotions can move very, very quickly. And I think there's another word that I know you and I talk about where this is a sensory threshold too, the liminal. So it's very much like a felt sense. It doesn't always make sense rationally. We might be surprised both by ourselves, by other people, by how other people are reacting or responding, or it's because like it's like whatever was underneath the surface is emerging. And so to put a lot of space around that, rather than to let anything be solid, because it's not a solid place yet.
Yes. And I feel like that's one of the reasons we're talking about this, is because I think having the words and the understanding that, oh, this is normal. This is a stage that it's okay to give it space is so helpful, because I think we so want to get out of it often. And I see there's a question, how does indecisiveness fit in?
Yeah, I just want to say you just named that paradox, right?
Yeah.
People like, there's too much space here. There's too much choice. There's,
Yeah.
it's like the paralyzation of choice or just like, yeah. And yet, um, giving it more space, maybe we can come back to that after what you want to share a bit later, but that giving it more space doesn't mean to be complacent or numb, or to wait it out. Giving something space is an actual action, and it's the action of that returns a lot of power to us. So maybe we come back to that in a minute, but I wanted to just come back to what you were sharing.
Yeah, well, I saw there was a question about how does indecisiveness fit in, and can you get stuck in the liminal? And I'll say indecisiveness is definitely a common experience in the liminal. Again, just like you are speaking to that, because we want to get out, and even can be a pressure for that. Yet, if we're not ready, if we haven't gotten to the place where there's clarity, then we can definitely get somewhat stuck in that place of wanting to move out, and but really needing to listen and needing to wait. And I'll say, things will change, things will become clear. I think there are ways where we might get stuck for longer in the liminal state, and ways to really help ourselves to keep moving through it. But it can go on for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know we kind of talk about there being two, like within the liminal itself, there's two phases. Um, and again, this is in so many stories. It's in so many narratives across different cultures and times, and we can relate to it in many ways in things that we've already gone through as well as right now. But that first half is kind of like the descent, and you were mentioning fear, where it's like sometimes a terror, or there's this kind of consumingness sometimes to the things, the way that they move. And with a death process, it's like it requires us to give something up. And so that sort of resistance that we might feel on the way down, and some of the things, that we want to pull ourselves out of that, or avoid that, or even like as we're talking, say, it's going to get better. Like we reach for these kind of positives that are actually only really true in the second phase. So in the first phase, we're just kind of like trying to, talk ourselves through it. But the first phase is really like this letting go, and and just allowing it to move through us. And like one of the other really common features is like fatigue, right? Or like exhaustion, where like this decision fatigue, for example, where it's like, oh, it's just too much. And actually that like fatigue is an ally, exhaustion is an ally in moving us into the second phase of the liminal, because it is the one of the things that gets us through our resistance and our fighting, and including, and so it's only when we really reach that point that in this second phase where it's we there's an energy to it where we don't necessarily have the solution. We're not trying to control what will be, so we don't necessarily have all the answers or a new structure or anything yet, but we're comfortable. We're suddenly comfortable in this space, or the possibility started to arrive, or we found a different ground here. And so, we can obviously speak to kind of this shifting zone, and in the middle, often we call it the abyss that kind of happens, where we got to go into this place. And in Te Ao Māori, in the Māori worldview or the Polynesian worldview, the name for this place of the liminal, of like te kore, like the nothingness, the blackness, this original beginning space that is really going into the emptiness of things, and also where all fullness arrives. And so, these kind of metaphors of like stepping off into the abyss or the free fall, and I think that this is there's a quality in this that I know I've experienced many times personally, of like where the death process spills into everything. So in contrast to the ordinary world, where like, here's my work life and my love life and my family life, and all these different components, and we like to compartmentalize and have everything in its place. In the liminal, everything just like bleeds into, and there's this like exasperation of like, do you have to touch everything? And I think this is what is part of what we're in collectively over the past couple of years, is like, do not be surprised if this is spilling into all these corners of the room and of your body. And so part of this sort of descent is having to let go before anything can settle. And it's like, that's kind of like the nature of transformation, right? Is it just kind of sweeps the ocean floor.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and as you share that, the words come to me, the pregnant pause. That's really that pause where so much is possible, and something new can actually arise from that place. And the other words that came to me as you were sharing was, one is yield, right? Just the yielding into the earth, yielding into sort of the letting go of trying to fix or control or make something happen, and listening, that we're really listening to our own heart, listening to what's out there, listening to support, and really feeling, like yielding into our own bodies to feel, wait, what's the way through? What's right now? What's true now that was different than before? And I just think of any big change that we ever could think of in the world culturally, it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, maybe the loss can happen overnight, but the new way is really an evolution over time.
Yeah. And also, and how, we realize in this place that things aren't separate. You know, so these sort of illusions come up, and the feeling of things being connected, or the ground that is unchanging. You know, so these kind of that at the bottom of the abyss there is an arrival. It's inevitable, but we can't control it. And we can't you know, we can't push ourselves there. Anyone that's tried to move a partner or a family member through change knows that, you know, everything you do will go the opposite direction. So it's like, it's the same. It's the, like what you said, like unfurling your hands, but being with what is actually happening is the point normally that brings us to the other side. And I love what, you know, we talk a lot, right, about finding a question in this place that, you know, as often the most orienting thing is listening to what question is like pulsating in you, or, you know, waking you up at 4 a.m. or whatever it is. And the more specific the question, the closer we are to the answer already. And that this can be a really orienting thing in this place, is to find what question, because part of the what was that, you know, flushing of the ocean floor is that it actually brings us to a deeper clarity, or a deeper need, maybe needs that we hadn't even acknowledged are in us, or values and things, you know, purpose and things that we hold, like in all the emotional things that are coming up as we're moving through this, in terms of your reactions and, you know, what upsets you or what saddens you. Like beneath that are these values. And also, you know, part of this second stage of the liminal is like discernment, right? So it's like you can't focus on everything, and so it really, there's a sort of clarity or discernment, or like, what's the deeper value here that is part of that. So yeah.
Right. And often we have less energy in a way because we're managing that unknown, where the things that no longer serve us or are old fall away. And it can be a call to discernment, and even boundaries, or like, how are we using our time and energy?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's
So,
where choice comes back, right? You know, the first phase, we're just overwhelmed because everything's up in the air. And the second part, we're like, yeah, I just appreciate how you just said that again, of that fatigue and exhaustion is part of it. It's part of it because it focuses you in, you know. And again, that's always part of any kind of, again, the quest, right, is we go through the distraction and the fatigue to get to something that's been beneath there, that's actually been taking a lot of our energy in our ordinary world without us maybe aware of it.
Yes. And I'm just thinking of a couple, you know, there's a great book called Transitions by William Bridges, who is a psychologist, and he writes about life change as a rite of passage, and has lots of examples. And one of the ways that he talks about the liminal is, he talks about, you know, how long it is, and the boredom and the irritation and the feeling like it's never going to end. And he uses this metaphor, which is so visceral whenever I hear it. He says it's like lying beneath the floorboards, hoping that someone will discover you one day. And just this like, oh my gosh, nobody knows I'm here. I'm lying beneath the floorboards. And I always just, it's like, oh, I feel that when I read those words.
I can relate to that just from recovery from this car accident over the first, you know, that was definitely my first half of my recovery process. Yeah. I think, like, you know, there's something about posture in that it's, because we're talking about sensation, right, and the nervous system. And you know, I think another part of our society is so much about talking our way out of things, you know, like our positive mind, and
Mhm.
mantras and ways to be, and that actually what we cannot avoid in this liminal space is that the very first piece is just to be with.
Mhm.
So the opposite of distraction maybe being like a heightened concentration,
Mm.
of just like actually being with something, and that is the piece that actually creates the movement. And so sometimes, like in terms of posture, yeah, to like lie on the floor, or to like to actually listen to your
Mm.
body. What is posturally, like what does this feel like if I was to just exaggerate this for a moment? And that there's something that is really like tending that place.
Mm.
It's like the opposite of avoidance, and all of a sudden, you know again, this is another paradox that to that
Mhm.
can creates a movement.
Yes. It makes me think I how many times I've said to people, have the temper tantrum. Let yourself actually express the rage, express the disappointment. Let yourself have it, because there can be that, oh, I
Mm.
should look on the bright side, or I shouldn't have this feeling. I should feel better. I should do it differently. And sometimes just the permission to express it in our bodies, or in our voice, or in our, shout it or cry it or grieve it. There's something that really can help us be with it and help us move it.
Yeah, and that just reminds me too that this is a place where the energy of the child is
Mm.
so helpful. I think about every time I've come off, a retreat where we're working around trauma kind of intensively. I've been like, where are my nieces and my nephews at? And there's something about this, like the
Mm.
child uninhibited energy that's going to just like stomp down the hallway, And I
Mhm.
think as adults, we have part of the death process around their identities, which is definitely one of the fights that we're in right now, is around what it means to be a good person or a healed person or a healthy person, you know, um, or any
Mm.
of the other kind of identities that we have that make us feel safe. And so when we're in the liminal, the reason why most of us don't let other people in when we're in the liminal, the reason most of us go into a cave or hide under the floorboards, is because we're like, I don't want to be seen here,
Mhm.
especially for healer helper types who are like, oh no, I have expertise in this place. It's like, no one's immune. So,
Mhm.
sometimes
Mhm.
I find like this coming back to the child as the teacher, where if you follow a child around with that pure
Mhm.
energy, um, it that's really helpful. And it's also part of this second part of the liminal, is the listening, right? And
Mhm.
we talk about how doubt makes our what we trust in get stronger, because it's like
Mhm.
second half of the liminal, there's these confirmations in us that is like confirmed. So like, because we've been challenged, the next time someone challenges us, we're like, no,
Mhm.
I know this now, I
Mhm.
know this in myself. And that this is also where children have this openness of hearing things without having to figure them out, like receiving a piece and not needing to know the how, what, when, why. And so this is another practice, right, of the second stage of the liminal, is like the eyes of the child. Like, we don't need to know the details. But if we stay with the heart of it, because it is this open space, the next thing and the next thing will come through us, or become, all those things will pour in.
Yes. I love it. I feel like we're kind of intermingled. What is the liminal? What is it like? With what do you do there? And I wonder if we shift into more of what do we do, which we were just speaking to. What do you do, in the liminal? How do you move through it? How do we stay connected to ourselves and each other and not go crazy? Really, for not uh or just check out of life.
Mm.
And so I think some of those pieces we were just speaking to, the expressing and the moving and the listening. And I think there's really something about feeling. feel, there's so many ways that we cannot feel, so many addictions in the world. And every moment we can, eat something, take something, watch something, whatever it is. And so there's a real practice of learning to tolerate feeling our emotions, feeling our bodies. And one of the things that helps that is the expression, so that we really feel that it can move, that it's moving through us, that it's energy, that it's a wave, that it's not something that we don't really let it get stuck, because it can feel like there's so much stuckness in the liminal that I think, what are all the ways? There are many ways, but what are the ways to keep feeling and keep moving our bodies, moving the emotions, etc.
Yeah, and I just like the center of what I'm hearing as you're talking is that we have to go in, we have to go through and in it. So, there's all these practices, right, that we could speak to that are in our different, toolboxes, kite, and but it's how we approach it that makes all the difference. So if we're doing something to distract us, that might be a great coping thing, but it's probably not going to get us through the liminal. But if we do it as a way of entering in, and I think that's what, as we're talking about, like orienting to a question, like what is one of the questions that is keeping you awake at night, or that is worrying you, or that you have, and that often what we need in the liminal is a container. So like, whether that's to be with that question for a designated, determined period of time, or if it's to walk it for an hour, knowing that you're just going to walk the question, you're going to, the liminal. And I saw someone wrote here about motherhood. It's like, it brings you into the present moment. And the more we try and future or past, the more we tread water. And so to go into the concentration or the rhythm or the listening with that question, whether it's, to walk it, knowing that when you return, you will have something. You don't need to even figure it out, but the walk, you're just creating a container for that to be listening, let life mirror it to you. Like, what do I notice? What do I feel? What's shown to me on this walk? Let life enter. And that, it does, this place obviously brings up how we're in relationship with something bigger than ourselves. Whatever that means for people, whether that's part of their spiritual landscape, or how they relate to that, but that we are relating to something greater because that's part of the context of what's happening.
Yes, and as you were just speaking that part about the container and also the clarity of the question, right, around what is the question that we're holding and walking the question, I also think about, depending on your beliefs or practices, praying the question, like crying for a vision or support, or journeying on a question, all the ways that we really open up to something greater than ourselves for support or guidance. Those are great practices.
Yeah, and it's so much of what you need is we come to like our needs in this place, but so much of what we need to hear is around us, and it's sort of like when we are in a transition and we kind of, a part of us already knows, but we just can't be with it yet, right? But regardless, like another way of being with the question of, just sitting with a patch of your garden, a patch of soil, and just being with like, how does this reflect on my life right now? And just ways that we can observe and listen in terms of being able to see just where we are. As soon as we kind of see where we are, there's just like a relief, because that's part of the orienting, right? It's like, where am I? What do I need to know right now? What's happening right now?
Yes.
What's here right now?
Yes. I was just having this memory as you were sharing this of a couple of years ago. I was in a transition with a particular relationship in my life where had been some significant conflict that was really painful. And for, months, it felt like every conversation I was in, or, wherever I was, I kept getting messages that was like, oh, this poem, there's something in that has to do with this experience. Or, a friend was talking about their experience in, relationship or something they learned. And it was the ahas just kept coming in. And I think, right, there's an openness and a vulnerability and almost like a magnetic, we see or hear what we need when we're in that more open and really vulnerable place.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have another practice in this place that you want to name?
Yeah, along with the expression piece that we were just speaking about, I'm thinking there's a journal exercise that I often have people do, which is another, right, the expression through writing. And it's a grief journaling exercise. And so with the experience of grief, it's really all the emotions, right? The grief when we have a loss, it's the sadness, there's often anger, a disappointment, the bargaining or wishing, like, is there any way this cannot be true? There's and sometimes relief and sometimes hope, right? And so I have people journal all of those. So what I'm angry about, what I'm sad about, what I'm not ready to accept, what I am accepting, what I appreciate, what I'm grateful for, and say, do this exercise every day or every week to just keep those emotions and words and feelings flowing, because it's not a one-time thing, right? We don't just express it and then it's done. There are so many nuances, and it keeps unfolding, and clarity comes, and our relationship to whatever it is changes over time. And so having practices to keep
Yeah.
revisiting.
Yeah, I love that, and also the pressure that you just removed, because it's like something new can enter each moment, and there's a part of like being in this veiled liminals that we can't see, and yet again the other paradox of it's where we go. We go on the quest, we go through the breakup, we go through the grief, and we get actually really clear, crystal clear, and it that is the process. But it's sort of like a dream space sometimes where we get visions from our dreams, but while we're in it, we're like trying to make sense of things. And so the idea of having a container here where it's like, okay, I'm gonna sit and write for 10 minutes, or I'm gonna walk this question for an hour, or to actually put a container around something, one allows you to have like heightened listening or heightened concentration, which we can't sustain in ordinary life, and we're kind of like swimming in it in a liminal, and we're like, oh, and so there's a container. And then the other part is the trust that something will happen, which we know, even when someone returns from like a solo on the land, like even when on their return, they might not have a full understanding of it yet, but it has taken place, and we witness that. And so, yeah, you just removing the pressure of like to accept the peace, like whatever peace you receive in that right now, knowing that, because I think a lot of the time when we decide, oh yeah, I'm gonna, do this ceremony around this or do this, that part of the reason why we put it off and never do it is because we feel like it's got to change our life, or we've got to there's like so much weight on it. Whereas if it's like no, it's just an action, like all that it is one action that brings me closer to myself, and that is going to give some relief to my heart, that is going to fulfill one of my needs, or have me see one of my needs.
Yes.
And that's like enough,
Oh, I love that. I want to share, right, our definition of ceremony, which is the action or set of actions toward a particular intention that you were just describing, that it's again, it's the movement, it's putting something into action. And I often talk
Mhm.
about it as like it's planting seeds, and we might not see something profound bloom at that moment when we do the ceremony, although we might, but that it really is um, of focusing our energy in a particular way that then has a ripple effect over time.
Yeah. And I'm aware of our time, and I know we've got a couple of questions that we should jump to in a minute, but I just want to name like the ecosystem of this too.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about like a spiritual landscape and the natural process. Like this is all part of the natural process. And it's like those imaginal seeds in the cocoon, or the way a seed already contains the whole tree. And that part of being in this state of, what I was referring to as te po, te kore, is that it's the empty space of which all things birthed, or it's, and so part of this too just gets us in, there's a humility, right, and so sometimes it just as another practice can be looking for examples of this around us, examples of death, examples of rebirth, or of creativity. And
Mm-hmm.
we can also do that obviously in our stories. And um, yeah, that there are so many myths, movies, mainstream, old, ancient, that we most relate to the character. The reason we most love or respect that character is because we see him in the liminal. It's the
Uh-huh.
liminal that has us go, you know, where all our connectivity comes from. So I have a
Mm-hmm.
right now, with just seeing everyone's beautiful names pop up, and just this felt sense of like, this is the connectivity that's born from this place, and what it
Yes.
required was like a total rift, in that, for us to arrive. But
Yeah.
I'm going to hold that as one of my core values that's emerged from here is, and how am I connected to just where I am, so that I don't miss what's
Mm.
happening like right now.
Mm.
Yeah. So
And
I just want,
yeah,
oh, sorry. Yeah.
go ahead.
I just, because you were talking about this definition of ceremony, if you want to download, we have a free guide on the website, which will just walk you through. And it could be another resource for right now of being with the intentional action around your experience. And so that's on ritesofpassagetraining.com.
Great. Thank you. Um, I was really feeling another big piece in the liminal, and well, always, but in the liminal is connection with other humans, and whether that is a friend or a mentor or a guide, and really looking to, in that place, who are those that we trust? Who are those that we resonate with or respect? And even though we each have our own journeys, right, that there's something we can learn from those that maybe have been through this before, or just someone that we appreciate their way in the world that can help us with perspective or guidance, or really ultimately point us back to our own wisdom.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and having the conversations and normalizing what's happening, and so helpful.
Can we also normalize that in this, underworld liminal, um, not everyone will be in that with us. Like your allies, your guides,
Mhm.
the people that you share with, that you connect with, is not everyone that you love or like in your life. That because it's not, the other stages being in the ordinary world, that's maybe where your community sits. And in this place, there is a discernment on who is in this place with me. And so I think that is also something that we're feeling maybe in our communities and society, is that in the rift, is that it's okay to be with, knowing that this is a stage to just remark on who's here with you right now, knowing that when
Mhm.
we enter the integration stage, that's like returning to wider community. or extended
Yes.
relationships. And it can be surprising who's the ally, who's the teacher, who's the mirror at any given time. So it's like, again, this is the child who just approaches that person on the park bench, of like allowing ourselves to be surprised and just relate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Should we shift to questions? Is there anything
Yeah.
else you want to share?
Yeah, let's do that. So I'm going to bring them up on the screen. We've had a couple people message in some questions. If you're listening and you want to ask a question, if there's anything you want to comment, you're welcome to comment. We could have said that earlier, I guess, but you're welcome to type in a question if you have one. And then Katie, can you put up one of those ones there?
Yeah, or I'll just read it here.
Okay. And
any guy, yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. Any guidance for navigating the liminal space with co-parenting partner who you are consciously uncoupling with, since you hold different visions of the future?
Yes. So
That's a big question.
let's state that again. So you're in the liminal with your partner who you're consciously uncoupling with. So you're going through a relationship transition, divorce, separation, ending, which puts you both in the liminal, and
the
you both
relationship.
have different, and the relationship. There was also the mention of children.
Yes.
Which is
Parenting.
maybe parenting, and then, different visions of like what's to come. And so I just want to acknowledge that, like, in our ordinary life, we, as two people going through a transition like that, like a relationship ending, we might enter the liminal at a different time, depending on how we accept that, or move into the in-between stage. But let's just answer that as if both people are in there. Do you have any further?
Well,
Katie?
I just want to like send lots of compassion and empathy to you, and just feel what I feel in that is the importance of having feelings, like having your feelings and expression, and that might not be with each other all the time, but for yourself to really find places to be able to feel and express all that's coming up, to find those creative ways through. And I think also as a parent, making space for feelings of your child, and that's also can be tricky, having empathy without necessarily, but also creating spaciousness for the whole situation. And I just feel the challenges of, especially with co-parenting, when it's something that's so important to you, and with different perspectives, there can be a lot of emotion with that.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I hear in that too, just to mirror back, is that, when we're in the separating phase or the first stage of change, and we're just going through the struggle of what is to be, or, for a lot of couples when we're together, there's this having to figure it out together, right? So you're orienting off each other and that conversation. The gift of the liminal is that you're not actually walking side by side or holding hands. And so it's almost like that is the place to be in. Part of a separation or divorce, right, is this return to yourself, and this recovery often, or resurgence of things that maybe have been put down or forgotten. And so it's like, this is the potentiality of being in the liminal on your own journey. And also I hear that, and knowing this person too, that she's also very much holding her family in it, of like, what story, what traditions, what ways will our family look like on the other side of this? And so there's sort of the openness to that I think brings the most fullness to the picture, and also just allowing the other person without needing to guide or be in the process together.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing we can do is allowing them to be in their own unpacking and unraveling and, you know, relanding. Then it's in the next stage when there's a clarity in each person on whatever it is that they hold most dear, that where the third stage will be, you know, how that looks. And so the difference is, instead of where we might be like, I want this, and we're wrestling with it, when we've gone through these stages, when we actually moved through the liminal and given that space to ourselves, the third stage is instead, hey, here's my offering to you, to us. And the other person's like, here's my offering. So that's, I think, the potential that I hear there.
Such a big question.
Again, requires the letting go of control of the other. Yeah.
Right. Do you want me to read the second question that I have?
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, if anyone else has a question here about being in the liminal, feel free to write it in.
So I love the concept of liminal space. I'm in it and feel stuck. I retired last year. How do I find passion for me to thrive on creativity and serving? I feel like a child again and can pick whatever I want to do, except I have tools for, what does this say? For a great spiritual program, plenty of money, an open heart, and a lot of insight into the lessons I came here to learn and share. Ooh, pregnant possibility.
Well, if you say can we just, because, you know, part of this too is to be able to hold our opposites, right? Or to welcome different parts together. So I just want to acknowledge, was the first line like, I don't like it here, and then it went to, here's all the ways it's fruitful? Can you?
I'm in it and feel stuck. I
Okay.
retired last year. How do I find passion for me to thrive on creativity and serving? And lots of choice. Oh my gosh, I love that.
You know it's interesting, because at the end she's naming all her resources, right? So if we're in the ordinary world, if we weren't in the middle of the depths of a big transition, we would go, okay, here's my resources, what do I do? And sometimes we move a little automatically, right, on what we think we should do or what we see others doing or whatever. But when you're in the liminal, she's like acknowledging all her resources, and she's like, I feel stuck, what am I passionate about? And so this is the depth of that place of, you know, I want this to matter, or I want this to mean something, or I want to like simplify or find the heart of, you know, the octopus.
Yes, and it's such a great example of how even good transitions can bring up some fear and ungroundedness and confusion. And I mean, you know, obviously each person's going to find their way, but I feel the listen, follow the passion, listen some more. I also think about when people are in big life transitions. I do parts work and looking at different, I know you do as well, different parts of ourselves. And I like to find, what do all the different parts want or need? Because often I think that's part of the inner conflict, is which want do I follow? And so to really give all of those parts of us a voice can be really illuminating, and can also create the space to really find our way into the next phase with balance. And so no part of us gets left behind, really.
And because we're not reference, you know, again, the first and third stage has an external reference point, right, in the world, whereas this liminal, the in-between, is very much internal. So it's also, we might have a dominant part in different contexts or different relationships, but when we're in the liminal, it's like there'll be other parts that want our attention. And sometimes that's scary, because there might be parts we're not so proud of or we don't like as much.